Greenfield developer who looks for raw land that basically starts from the initial stages in terms of feasibilities, how the maths behind the project is going to work in terms of the current environment that we all live in, the property market in my case, and basically break it down to each section. Personally, I'm very heavily involved from that feasibility, from using AutoCAD to do rough layouts, to linking in with town planning, and the engineering is probably my forte as well. As a developer, I've been working for 20 years independently. I guess probably the background that I had as a younger guy was working for the bigger companies with theses and things like that, where I have a civil background. You know, we have the ability to do all our roads and all that pipe work ourselves, and it's that hands-on experience that I've always maintained, and generally I flow into the whole project management of the process when we're actually doing the build as well. So it's been a very easy integration. Look, typically raising capital was such a drawn-out process with your big four banks, and they were very restricted in terms of their policies and their requirements that they needed. The beauty of Stack is, although they've got that commercial background from the banking sector, they've kind of adapted to what the current market needs. With that being said, they adapted accordingly, where they're more realistic in terms of what requirements developers need, as well as banking institutions. Probably the convenience and the realistic process of it. Typically your main funders would be looking for pre-sales in terms of, you know, dollar for dollar ratio is what you borrow would need to be covered in terms of a pre-sale. Obviously 10% deposits were the typical norm, and they have been for some time. I guess using Stack gave us the ability just to launch straight into jobs where we'd have a lot of momentum behind our commercial enterprise, and we didn't have to wait for the funding process, which really was a very drawn-out bureaucratical style of banking. But again, Stack are just aware of that, really picked a niche in the market, and yeah, it's been a very straightforward process. Well, ironically, my original banking days, commercial banking days, were through NAB, and I think I had a history with Mark Trainer at Stack probably some 15, 20 years ago. Again, he always knew my style of project management, my style of development, and it made sense, and he's great to bounce ideas off and work with during the whole process as well. Generally, flexibility. It takes the whole ability for the process, and it's just a smoother operation in terms of, you know, putting an application into actually getting funding rather than going through the whole bank manager detail, the valuation, and then ultimately the cross your fingers at credit and see what happens. And it was a very frustrating process, and you know, from there they would typically come back with 20 conditions that you'd pull your hair out and say, this is pretty hard to work with from a practical sense. Well, the ability to directly talk to people who are making the decisions, and rather than having sort of 5 or 10 people in between the start line and the finish line, the benefits of having Stack was it ties it all together very easily. There was only one process, and again they understood the whole starting point and the finish point, and then typically, as long as you're talking sense as a developer and it makes sense mathematically, it should be pretty easy to tie 2 bits of string together. But the direct understanding of the process in my business development. What I spoke to in terms of logistics, they've experienced before and they understood. And if there were any hurdles along the way, they would adapt and formulate a process to overcome those hurdles from both the finances end as well as my end.